Hello everybody, welcome to WhatCulture Gaming. I'm Scott, joined by Josh.
Hello Scott.
Josh, my friend, it is quite a quiet time in regards to overall news things going on, but I want to have a conversation about what the living hell Square Enix are doing, because it's like watching someone fall down a hill in slow motion for the last few years, especially the last few months in 2022, and I want to break down a few different things. There's a few different categories here that I want to touch upon, because they're getting every single thing wrong, and they're only remote positive. Like I said, if they're falling down a hill, they occasionally do that thing where someone sort of stands up a little bit, they're back down again. They're falling down, they're breaking all the bones, and it's just sad to see because they have a lot more potential than what is being exuding right now. So there are various things to break down. The main catalyst for this is that they have messed up the Chocobo GP. Remake, remaster, whatever you want to call it, with an insane microtransaction push, an insane grind, an insane reliance on premium currency, and an insane ask of people's time to just unlock something like Cloud, to play as Cloud in the game. They've already got out there and apologized for it. The fact that the live service component of the game was offline during the review period was a horrible red flag in the first place, but now they're out there apologizing for it. So I want to run down a few different things that are the biggest red flags that we've had, and we'll get to everything else that they've been messing up. I've got three main categories here, and a fourth bonus category, if we have time. So biggest things that I think that they've completely messed up that I couldn't believe they got wrong. One is the Avengers.
Yes.
Ridiculous. The amount of teams that they pulled off other projects, them try and make that thing work. Crystal Dynamics just pull them off Tomb Raider, stick them on the Avengers, clag them on. Maybe that'll work, and it didn't. Avengers obviously being dominated by an insane, again, push for premium currency, and that been an absolute mess. There's the whole thing that that Avengers lost them $48 million in operating revenue, and they were only saved as a company by the Final Fantasy VII Remake, making sales go back up by 43%. But they were right, they had messed up quite royally in that regard. There's Balan Wonderworld, the fact that they got the creator of Sonic back in to do a whole new IP, first one since Billy Hatcher back in the day, and said, do whatever you want, Yuji Naka, you've got free keys to the kingdom. And then they said, actually, no, do this instead, and you've got to have it done by next month or whatever it was. Game came out, absolute travesty. Yuji Naka left the industry. He's now doing indie stuff, so he's not left altogether, but still.
Thanks, Square Enix.
So, thanks, Square. That's what we should hash. Thanks, Square Enix, for doing all this stuff. I've got three more tiny things here. The next one is President Yosuke Matsuda speaking at the start of this year, saying that he thinks NFTs are the best thing ever, and he thinks that they've been accepted. What was his exact quote? He thinks blockchain technology will become a major trend, and he said that they have all been met with a great deal of enthusiasm by a rapidly expanding user base. They're already dead. I mean, I know that was at the start of 2022, but still. And then two other things is, one, The Quiet Man from 2018, which, what even was that?
I don't know what
even was that game.
I do not know what was going on with The Quiet Man.
What are we doing? And the last thing in this particular category is Babylon's Fall, the game that has just recently released and is the lowest rated game of the year with only a few hundred registered players. And I feel sorry for each and every single one of them, because Square Enix took Platinum Games, a veteran dev, know exactly what they're doing, and then said, do another premium loot grindy microtransaction thing, and it's killed it yet again.
Now listen, I'm not a scientist, but it sounds to me like there's a lot of stinkers on that list.
Yes.
Like a lot of just
pongers.
I like that any kind of one of these examples would almost be enough to justify this video, but when you do line everything up like this, it's kind of unfathomable just how much they have gotten wrong, not only in the past year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, but going back essentially a full decade of just
Would you like to augment your pre-order, Josh?
Mistake after mistake. Yes, going all the way back to something like Deus Ex Mankind Divided, which, you know, I can't believe that series is dead. I can't believe one of like the... This is the... I don't know where to begin, because the Avengers thing, obviously, that is insane. The Avengers as a game, as a property, should have been the most surefire bet in gaming history. At the time, you know, you're coming out of Endgame, it's one of the biggest properties in the world, one of the biggest media properties, and you create a game to capitalize on that success that loses you $42 million. Like, that's impressive in its kind of incompetence, I suppose.
$48 million.
48? Even worse! Even worse! I was giving them some leeway. It was somehow even worse than I remembered. Yeah, it's just kind of like they're on this kind of like railroad where they're putting the tracks down immediately in front of them, but still heading for a wall, and I don't know how they're doing it.
But it's a wall that they keep erecting in the first place.
Yeah.
It's like, put a track down in a brick, and then a wall in a brick, and it's like every time if you just did the thing that would clearly work, it would probably clearly work, especially in regards to the Avengers stuff. All you needed to do was a nice fun action game that let us play as the superheroes and not rinse us with 7 different premium currencies.
100%. Like,
so, well,
no, I was just going to like echo what you were talking there about, you know, the monetization, the NFT kind of push. It's just so blatant, you know. know, it's just so kind of ugly in a way that these games are just made to rinse, or at least most of these games are just made to rinse players for as much money as possible. And it's just kind of like, I thought we were over this as an industry. It feels like we should have stopped talking about this kind of stuff after Battlefront 2, you know, 5 years ago or whatever. Yet Square Enix almost seems like an outlier who is continuing to push just kind of some of the worst monetization practices in the industry.
Well, it feels like Ubisoft kind of learned their lesson. Like, you know, the whole thing with Ghost Recon Breakpoint having a 93% drop in operating income for the company across the board. And you'd like to think that they would learn their lesson. But having played Chocobo GP, that thing is absolutely rancid visually with the amount of pop-ups and horrible mobile game-looking stuff that it wants you to buy into. My second overall category was just live service and monetization stuff, because they've had 3 things in a row that have all been dogged by this stuff: Chocobo GP, Babylon's Fall, Avengers. To name but 3, like Josh said, you can go back to the likes of Deus Ex, a game whose multiplayer component was completely forced in, according to Commander Sterling over on their channel, saying that according to them, when the development of that game was being put together, they didn't even plan for a multiplayer mode at all, and that's where that whole augment your pre-order thing came from. The idea of, you know, what part of this game can we siphon off and roll in microtransaction to death and all that stuff, and obviously that was a few years ago, but it just seems to be a general mandate that they've got at the heart of their company, that they want to take something and just rinse the living hell out of it. It feels like that's what Avengers was, and it's just the dog worst. So the final category to roll in, and we'll go back to reeling some different things off, is the amount of different games and franchises they've said didn't meet expectations, which has become a meme at this point.
It's one of gaming's funniest running jokes, Scott Tilford. I love it, and I can't believe that. Like, if I was them, I would just stop admitting that things come in under expectations, because how do they not know that every time it happens, everyone just kind of loses their minds, because it's so funny at this point.
It's so, I mean, the thing is, there are some success stories in here, like the fact that they said that Hitman didn't meet its sales expectations, therefore it allowed IO Interactive to take the IP and get the hell out of Dodge with it, and then go and do amazing things with the Hitman IP overall. But at the same time, there are a lot more casualties of this approach anyway, where they're setting ridiculous sales targets and then also complaining that they're not able to break the West, and all these different games aren't taking off in the West, whilst barely doing any marketing for it. Like, for example, Guardians of the Galaxy, one of the best games that's been put out under them as a publishing label that like 20 people played.
Yeah.
And it's just like, that is an incredibly well-written game, brilliant character-focused game, whose marketing was a complete travesty.
This is why I think people like me and you get so frustrated by their actions, because they're taking, you know, franchises that should be at the very top of gaming and completely mismanaging them. I could be wrong, but you mentioned Stephanie Sterling's show, The Jimquisition, earlier, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think they also did a video on Hitman and the way that was turned into an episodic game. You know, the first Hitman was episodic. And I think it was their video that pointed out that it was...
Some of that came from IO as well. But...
Right, yeah. But it was kind of like this push that Square Enix was doing, where they were kind of like, is gaming dead? Let's go episodic. And obviously the Hitman franchise now, with Hitman 3, now that IO is kind of split off from Square Enix, has been allowed to do its own thing, kind of take charge, it's doing really well. Like, Hitman 3 did exceptionally well, but you compare that to how it was under Square, and it just wasn't, you know, as big as it could have been. The same with Deus Ex, the same with Tomb Raider, the same with the Avengers. And you reel off these franchises, and you reel off the developers that have been attached to them. It's Crystal Dynamics, Eidos Montreal, the latest Casualty, Platinum Games, you know what I mean? All of these great devs, all of these great franchises. How is this not working? How is it not working?
It feels like the sort of thing that we see across the board. You can tell when there's too much studio interference, whether it's for Metal Gear Solid 5, getting all the weird microtransaction, how to look after your mother-based stuff after launch, or whether it's just something like Anthem, where it just feels like too many studio-mandated ideas are in here that clearly never came from the coding department, the art department, the level design department, whatever other department than just the financial wing that said you should rinse this stuff to get more money out of it. Also in the list of casualties of games that didn't meet expectations was Sleeping Dogs and Outriders, funnily enough. The latter of which I guarantee every single one of you forgot even existed, including us when we put the notes together. Sleeping Dogs, though.
Sleeping Dogs,
the best open world crime game possibly of all time, I don't know.
This is it. We could and probably have done lists of, you know, games that need a sequel or games that were done dirty. And Sleeping Dogs is one of the biggest travesties of the last 10 years, man. That thing should have been a big franchise. The original is such a great hidden gem. I think, well, I haven't played it in a while. I was going to say it still stands up.
I went back through it last year.
Well, there we go. It still stands up. You know what I mean? There's still something there. And it's another franchise that was just allowed to lapse and kind of go nowhere.
So with Sleeping Dogs, you can kind of dive into, you know, it was made by a new dev team called United Front. They did have some plans for a sequel. They kind of got morphed into a weird MMO type thing at one point, and then Square Enix just didn't believe enough in the project, didn't allocate enough funds to it to bring it to fruition, and like I said, because it didn't meet initial sales expectations, they didn't let it go forward and canned the whole thing. Sleeping Dogs, though, go play it. It runs very well on PS5. It's been patched. It's lovely. I love it. Sleeping Dogs is very good. My fourth bonus category, though, is the fact that they have all the Final Fantasy Pixel remasters not available on consoles. They're only available on Steam and iOS. What the f*** are you doing?
Why would you want it? It's only Final Fantasy.
It's the only thing that saved them twice in their career, Josh Brown.
Why
the
would you do
first
that?
time, they literally sat there in the 80s, and Final Fantasy was their last-ditch gambit to get something off the ground. That's why it was called Final Fantasy. Everyone knows this, but that's what got them off the ground in the first place. And then Final Fantasy VII Remake saved them after the Avengers stuff, and they still go, here's all these things that this entire fan base is screaming for on your phone. On your phone.
This kind of brings me to my question, Scott. You know, we've ragged on them through this whole video. We've talked about how bad they've done it in the past. When you look at the future of this company, what they've got upcoming in their library, do you think that they are a company that's realized their mistakes, or do you think that they're pushing ahead with the same old crap that they have done for the past 10 years?
They're chasing the money. Final Fantasy 16 is hopefully going to do well. The early teasers for that look pretty cool. It's kind of a return to more classic-looking fantasy overall as a genre, which Final Fantasy itself hasn't really done. Like Swords and Shields, Final Fantasy hasn't done that for a while. That seems cool. They are also talking about Final Fantasy 14's incredible success. And I'm forgetting the name of the dude that they brought in. Criminal, I can't remember that guy's name. But the dude that overhauled Final Fantasy 14. The reason that Final Fantasy 14 is in the state that it's in is down to this one guy whose surname begins with an M, and I'm forgetting his name, but he's a good dude. Final Fantasy 14 is the thing that they've now said they'll do a lot more with. But that's the easy, safe bet again. And the reason it's doing so well is because you guys stayed away from it. You let the team fly, and they are soaring. Leave them alone.
Well, this is it. This is kind of what I do want to point out after so much negativity, is that while generally I think the trend is kind of quite negative, I think there are still, highlights in there. I couldn't believe how much I loved the Final Fantasy VII Remake, for instance. Like you said, Final Fantasy 14 has like just huge numbers, huge fan base.
Pretty good.
And it's kind of like there are kind of success stories in there. It's just when you look at it as kind of a whole, it's just incredibly disappointing.
I think I'm more just all out negative than you, and overall in terms of the amount of IPs that they're in charge of, because I just look at the potential and I just go, what are you doing? What are you doing? Like, especially when things are right in front of them, like the Pixel remaster stuff. But it is worth taking stock that the one thing that they are championing, Final Fantasy VII Remake, did do well. However, Final Fantasy VII as an overall mythos is getting a battle royale. So, all good things. They're patching in, or they're going to add in the polygonal costumes from the original game, so we could all go do a battle royale as the original Blocky Cloud. I mean, I don't know, it's just video games in 2022, isn't it?
It's all you get. Final Fantasy's here. It's a battle royale, my friend.
just put me to bed, to be honest. But let me know what you think down in the comments below of the whole state of Square Enix and the amount of IPs that they both have and the amount of stuff that they've wasted across the last few years. For now, I've been Scott from WhatCulture.com.
I've been Josh from WhatCulture.com.
And we'll catch you next time.
Bye-bye.